We're finally back. Tomorrow is what we in the United States celebrate as Thanksgiving. And I stopped celebrating Thanksgiving, man, maybe 6 years ago, 5 years ago. Not like, soapbox, nobody should, or I'm not really that type of person in my politics or um, theology. I'm not, this is what I do, so this is what you need to do. But as a historian, there are things that I have become aware of that I believe when you know better, you should do better. Particularly Thanksgiving was a big deal. It's a big deal in America. It's a big deal, Black families. Within the Black culture, getting together as family and eating is like super huge deal. That being said, um, how Thanksgiving is taught now is not the way it was taught in the 70s and 80s, and definitely not how it was brought about into American culture. Thanksgiving goes all the way back to George Washington, um, where he recommended for, I believe, Washington, D.C. It was George Washington and I believe James Madison, but particularly George Washington as he was president, wanted to do a day of thanks. And I believe it was limited for the capital, which was at the time Philadelphia. And it wasn't a national thing, but different people began to try to push for it to be a national thing. The person who made it a national thing is Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln made it a national holiday to attempt to unify the country, really to distract them from the Civil War. And I believe that was in 1863. Yeah, it was 1863 that he did that. So this day of thanks was initially set aside by George Washington, but I believe the story associated with it came under Lincoln, which was the Native Americans saving the Jamestown, Virginia settlers who came to the New World and didn't know how to cultivate the land, did not know how to um, store food, and they shared their food with them and made sure that they lived until they did learn those skills and were able to build what is now the United States. And that was the emblematic story of why we as a nation should be thankful, because it came out of the gratuity of the human spirit that our country was born. And that gratuity is definitely true. But the problem was that gratuity was met with massive genocide. In the 70s and 80s, and apparently I would imagine the subsequent years, but I grew up in the 70s and 80s, Native American history was ignored. It was not as plentiful as it is now. And we didn't have as much information about the genocide that occurred to Native Americans. And I had the pleasure of learning it firsthand in the Shoshone Paiute tribal lands in the western part of the country, Nevada, California, Idaho. And Though I know a lot of Native Americans that do celebrate Thanksgiving, I thought that that was really in bad taste as a country, that we would celebrate the kindness of the people that we know the Europeans answered that kindness with lies, theft, rape, genocide, murder on sickening levels that extended all the way into the 20th century, into 1975, because the assimilation schools that were inflicted upon Native Americans, and particularly Native American children, existed into my lifetime, which means those people are still walking around. You know, technically, chattel slavery ended in 1865. Not American slavery, but chattel slavery did. If you read the 13th Amendment, that is clear. But so none of those people who experienced chattel slavery are still walking around. But the ones who were affected by the atrocities to Native Americans by the United States government are still walking around. I'm talking debilitating torture and abuse that to this day, these people are my age, are walking around with these scars that was given to them. So if there was a day that the country used to celebrate for the gifts of slavery, I wouldn't celebrate that. And even if the country said, well, we're really not, we're not talking about slavery. We're talking about being happy that we just have such a strong economy and always had. Well, just because you change it mainstream doesn't make it less disrespectful. And that's what I believe has happened with the Native Americans with Thanksgiving. So I do not celebrate it for that reason. It was brought about under the umbrella of white supremacy. It was not something for everyone to celebrate. It was for minorities to be misled that any group had an equal and egalitarian relationship with the European, that any group had an equal and egalitarian relationship with the European in this country, and that's just historically not the case. The European does not have an egalitarian relationship in this country. Poor whites are probably the biggest slave class that has ever existed in this country. They just don't know it. Down just because they weren't chattel slaves, they were labor slaves. And that's a lesson for another day. But I find it in bad taste that if you don't know what Thanksgiving was, that when people are educated, they say, well, that's not what I'm celebrating. I'm celebrating da 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 da. Well, many times we're doing just what we were told to do, instead of thinking for ourselves and saying, our country has a bad history of doing some bad things, and I'm not going to be a part of it. We come up with these justifications as to why it's okay. Now, to his own, I celebrate Christmas. I know it has nothing to do with religion. It is commercial. It is some fun to have. And that's the kind of fun I like to have. Now, I like to eat, but I can eat with my family 364 other days. I am not going to eat on that day because the most untrustful people have designated this day as a good day, and I've learned better. So that is why I stopped celebrating Thanksgiving. Um, and before you do anything, before you follow anybody's doctrine, ideology, education system, check into it. Make it make sense to you. Make sense to you. When I decided to dedicate my life to scholarship, I said that I was going to release everything that I had learned and everything that I accepted beyond that point, that I reaccepted, had to make sense on its own merits. Because if you think about it, our religion is our religion because of our geographic location, because of what our parents knew, because of what our grandparents knew, because of what our community knew. So we followed along with that. Okay, I'm in a Christian place, so Jesus is the reason for the season. I'm in a Muslim place, so Muhammad is it. I'm in a Buddhist place, so Buddha's it. And so on. Hindu. Whatever doctrine I would choose to follow beyond that point of dedicating myself to scholarship had to make sense. And I studied the religious texts and drew my opinions off of their merit and not that's what I've always done. And I encourage everybody to do that. You don't have to follow what I'm saying or what I think or what I believe, but develop what you believe and what you think. So, for whatever reason you're doing whatever you're doing, you know why you're doing it, and you're doing it because you want to, not because someone told you to. Just a thought.